about finding her true self.
So, a few years ago, I'm going to try holding this. A few years ago, I decided I need to get more active. Realized I wasn't getting any younger. I only look like I'm 25. And I wanted to be able to fully enjoy the years ahead of me. So I started running. God only knows why I started running, because I hate running. And I realized that after I tried it for a while. Next I tried mixed martial arts. That didn't last long. I realized I wanted to do something that would not only get me active, but would help me feel good about myself, would connect me with my desire to be enjoying serenity and beauty. So I took a ballet class. Because when you think about activities that are going to make you feel good about yourself, I'm sure ballet is right up there at the top of your list. That first class was hell. No other way to put it. So naturally, I went back the next week, and the week after, and the week after that. In fact, it's been almost 6 years now, and I still take ballet nearly every week. And despite my muscles, which still hurt after class every week, I had found in ballet an activity that brought me joy. Dancing not only got me in better physical shape, it also gave me confidence. Confidence to step into things that I didn't feel certain about, things that I wasn't sure I could succeed at. And it empowered me to explore parts of myself that I had denied and suppressed all of my life. Now, my childhood was pretty ordinary, really rather unremarkable. I grew up, well, I was born in Alabama, got out of there as soon as I could, and grew up mostly in suburban Denver. I was the middle of 3 children. I have an older brother and a younger sister. I did well at school. I generally stayed out of trouble. I played sports, but it wasn't really my big thing. From a fairly early age, as early as I can remember, I attended church with my parents and my family. And as I grew older, my church became the center point of my life. And my faith became the thing that gave my life focus and defined the way I saw myself in the world around me. Now, one of the things about me when I was young that might have been surprising to some was that most of my friends were girls, which maybe doesn't seem that odd, except when you realize that when I was a child, I was identified as a boy. And when you're a young boy, hanging out with the girls is not cool. Because at least when I was growing up, they had cooties, and everybody knew that. As I grew older, as I got into high school, I did have more male friends, and I would enjoy hanging out with them as well. But I also still enjoyed more hanging out with my female friends, which isn't so unusual when you're identified as a teenage boy, kind of expected. But for me, my interest was somewhat different than the boys, because not only did I want to date the girls, and I certainly wanted to do that, but I wanted to be one of them. And in the Christian subculture of suburban Denver in the mid-'80s, there really was not space for this. And there wasn't language and there wasn't vocabulary to understand myself. In those years, when I would occasionally be home alone, I would go into Mom's closet, and I would take a dress, and I'd put it on, and I'd wear it around the house until it was likely somebody was going to come home. This was my guilty pleasure, with an equal emphasis on the guilt and the pleasure, because I loved who I was in those moments, and I felt horribly guilty. I would literally pray to God for days afterward to forgive me for this horrible sin, and the fact that I loved it made it even worse, because I had no context to understand this behavior as anything but something that was wrong with me, something that was shameful, something that I needed to get rid of. So I buried it, suppressed it, denied it, and hoped it would go away. I never talked to another soul about it, ever, because I could not imagine that anybody would accept me, and I didn't accept myself. When I went out to college, I, of course, lost access to Mom's wardrobe. She didn't send it with me. And living as a person identified as male with a male roommate at a Christian college, wasn't exactly a lot of opportunities to explore the woman with him. Let's just put it that way. Nonetheless, most of my friends were still women, and eventually I met one whom I was attracted to more than others. We started dating, and before our senior year, we got married. I was all of 21, and I thought that I had figured myself out, when in fact I was making the ultimate effort to convince myself and the world around me that I was the male that I had been told I was from the moment I was born. So my wife and I built a life together. We graduated. A few years later, she supported me as I went off to graduate school. We had a daughter and a son. We moved to Tucson. A few years after being in Tucson, we followed an opportunity to move overseas, where we lived and worked for almost 10 years. And throughout that time, I was still wrestling with this sense of who am I inside? And occasionally I try to talk with her about aspects of it, but I still lack the vocabulary, I still lack the understanding of myself to communicate to her what was going on inside. And this persisted throughout that time. Fast forward now to 2011. We've been overseas almost 10 years. And we came back to Tucson for a couple months of vacation because we hadn't seen our families in over 2 years, and grandparents like to see their grandkids. A routine medical visit for one of my children returned a result that forced us to change our plans completely. Overnight, we decided that we needed to stay in Tucson rather than return overseas, which we had intended. And that decision caused everything I had understood about myself, everything that I believed in, everything that formed my identity to disappear overnight. And it left me asking the question, who am I? Who am I? That question opened the door to an exploration that would lead me to the most radical pivot I could possibly ever make. I started asking myself, what if this identification with the female, what if it's not something wrong with me? What if it is not something I need to suppress or deny? What if I embrace it? I started to explore that. And at the time I was working at home, so when my wife would go off to work and the kids went off to school, I could put on a dress or whatever I felt comfortable in on that day, and I could be me for a few hours. And it was wonderful. As long as I remembered to get changed before somebody came home, because I was not ready for anybody to know about this, because I still could not imagine that anybody would accept me for who I am. And I still wrestled with this shame and guilt that had been put into me from an early time in life. By October of 2015, I had been exploring my identity for 4 years, and I knew who I was. But I still was not ready to open it up, even to my spouse. I loved her, and I wanted to keep that relationship, and I did not want to risk the possibility of losing it by opening up this huge secret to her. One night, after ballet class, I was at home and I was texting one of my friends from class. And in the course of our conversation, I shared my identity with her. The first time I'd ever told anybody who I was. And I literally was shaking, waiting for her response, because I was so afraid. And she texted back and expressed affirmation and acceptance. She even offered to give me some dresses. And suddenly the door to my closet cracked open. And I saw the possibility of living fully, freely, and openly. I now faced the toughest choice I had ever faced. Because I could go through that door and I could tell my spouse and risk losing everything I had, or I could try to close that door and go back to suppressing it all and pretending this is not me. It took me a month to work up the courage to tell her. And when I did, her response was, "Then we're finished." I knew I had to be true to myself, and she knew that if I was, that she could not be with me. And after 25 years, our marriage ended. From that point, I had to go through divorce, which is painful. I then had to tell my kids, one of whom was away at college by that point. I had to tell my parents. There is no easy way to go tell your parents that the child they thought they knew for 40 plus years is someone very different. Thankfully, my children and my parents, along with my brother and his wife, chose to accept me. They've wrestled, they've had their own struggles, but they've chosen to accept me. My sister, not so much. But thanks to the support of my kids and my parents, I was able to go forward much more successfully than I would have been without their love. After I came out, I lost my job at the school that I had been teaching at for 4 years, because they weren't so keen on having me around, even though I was still the same teacher I'd always been. Which meant I had to get a new job, which meant I had to update my resume and my references, which meant I had to reach out to a bunch of people who were conservative Christians and basically out myself to them in the hope that they would accept me enough to be willing to still give me a reference. Thankfully, after some time of searching, I was able to get a job with a local nonprofit that has been very supportive and accepting of me. I also went down to Superior Court and changed my name. Then I had to go to Social Security Administration to change my federal records. Then over to motor vehicles to change my driver's license. Back to the courthouse to get a new passport. And then began the process of updating bank records, utility bills, transcripts, everything in our lives that is identified with who we are. In fact, just recently I finally got one account to change my name after 2 years of trying. Also, after coming out and separating from my wife, I got to start changing my appearance to really be who I was. Grew my hair out, still working on that. Got to start acquiring a new wardrobe. Had to learn how to put on makeup. Had to learn how to take off a sweaty sports bra. They don't teach you these things when you're growing up, male, okay? I started taking medication, some that blocked the testosterone that my body produced and some that introduced estrogen. After a while, I realized I needed to pursue surgery to bring my body into alignment with who I am. Prior to coming out, my entire social world was centered around my church. That community was lost to me. I no longer felt safe there. I no longer felt comfortable, and I had some pretty deep issues with faith. So I had to find a new social world. My dance studio became my second family. And I don't think I would be standing here today before you without that. Because they accepted and supported me every step of the way. And as I grew in confidence, I started entering new social venues like storytelling. And along the way, I have found a rich social network, and I have developed the deepest, healthiest friendships I've ever had, because I committed to being open and honest and vulnerable with those closest to me. I was done having secrets from the people who mattered most to me. It's been 3 years now since I came out. And in that time, my life has radically changed. It has not been easy. I have had to find new depths of internal strength over and over again. But I would not make a different decision if I could go back to 2015. I finally don't have to hide who I am from myself and from the world. And I look in the mirror every day, and I love the woman I see. For the past couple of years, over Labor Day weekend, I have volunteered at this amazing local camp for transgender youth and their families. Last September, as camp got started, this young boy, probably 6 or 7 years old, he came up to me, and with all the innocence and forthrightness that a child has, said, "Are you trans?" I got down on his level, looked him in the eye, and I said, "Yes, I am."